Good morning, club members. We digest world-class journalism and talk it through in plain English. Here are 5 stories worth your time. The Panama Canal Authority is cutting daily ship crossings from 36 down to 32. The first cuts will begin on September 3rd before the full limit arrives on September 15th. A severe drought caused by an intensifying El Niño weather pattern has drained local water supplies. Most people imagine ocean water when they picture a canal linking 2 great seas. In reality, the Panama Canal relies completely on fresh rainwater to operate its system of locks. Every single vessel that passes through lifts and drops on millions of litres of lake water. When each lock opens, that fresh water pours straight out into the sea. It is lost forever, meaning the canal depends on regular tropical storms to refill the lakes. This narrow passage carries more than 3% of all ocean trade around the world. When rainfall drops, international shipping lines face an immediate and expensive headache. Canal officials already ordered ships to carry lighter cargo loads during the previous month. Now, managers are reducing the total number of ships to protect their remaining water. Climate scientists warn that this current El Niño could become one of the most intense ever. That prospect brings back difficult memories of the historic dry spell 2 years ago. Back then, long queues formed on both sides of the canal, slowing down global trade. To make matters worse, other key shipping routes around the globe are already under pressure. Slot auctions for quick passage through the canal have hit startling new records. In August, the average crossing price reached about $1.1 million. That figure is more than 16 times higher than the price recorded last year. To handle the crunch, the Canal Authority will divide daily auctions into 4 cargo categories. This new approach aims to share booking slots fairly across different types of commercial trade. The biggest container vessels will receive top priority in the modern Neo-Panamax locks. Officials also hope to convince energy and food traders to return to the waterway. Many of those bulk traders took longer routes after the severe restrictions 2 years ago. For Panama itself, the financial stakes in this water crisis could hardly be larger. The canal brought in nearly $3 billion for the national government last year. Canal bosses admit that local weather patterns are now changing faster than expected. If the autumn rains fail to arrive, global shipping will face another round of painful delays. For our second story today, we look up from troubled waters into the night sky. An American startup has come up with an unusual business idea. They want to sell extra daylight on demand. Their plan is to launch large, reflective mirrors into orbit around Earth. These giant mirrors would catch natural sunlight in space and bounce it back down. The company hopes to power solar farms after sunset and help emergency crews work overnight. Later this year, they plan to launch a test satellite with an 18-meter mirror. If the test goes well, they want to launch up to 50,000 larger mirrors. The satellites would travel in high orbits from pole to pole. That flight path allows them to catch the sun just before sunrise and after sunset. To investors, lighting up solar fields in the dark might sound like clever engineering. Yet astronomers and environmental researchers are deeply alarmed by the idea. The trouble is that light does not stay inside a neat box. When a beam travels down through our atmosphere, air molecules and dust scatter the rays. A team of scientists recently calculated exactly how much light would spread outward. Inside the 5-kilometer target circle, one mirror would look 40 times brighter than the full moon. Even 14 kilometers away from the center, the satellite would still match a full moon. If 400 mirrors focused together, the scattered light would reach 80 kilometers away. People living far outside the target zone would see a strange bright glow above the horizon. Another earlier study warned that thousands of mirrors could brighten the night sky worldwide. Astronomers say this extra glare would make observing the deep universe almost impossible. Biologists also warn that artificial daylight could confuse birds, insects, and other nocturnal wildlife. The startup says these fears are based on inaccurate assumptions. Their leadership insists they have designed strict exclusion zones to keep sensitive areas dark. However, researchers point out that the company has not shared any numbers or technical models. Without real scientific data, independent experts cannot verify whether those safeguards will work. Despite these unanswered questions, United States regulators approved the first test launch last month. That leaves the scientific community wondering who actually controls our shared night sky. If private companies can redirect sunlight at will, a naturally dark night might soon become a memory. Moving from space down to Earth, our third story is about the giant American bond market. The United States government borrows trillions of dollars by selling bonds to investors around the world. For decades, investors treated these American bonds as the safest investment on the planet. But lately, those investors have started to rebel against Washington. Interest rates on 30-year government debt recently surged to a 20-year high. When bond yields climb like that, borrowing becomes far more expensive for everyone. Investors are increasingly frightened by America's $40 trillion debt pile. Persistent inflation and massive corporate borrowing for the AI boom also added pressure. To calm the market, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent tried an unconventional move. The Treasury surprised Wall Street by doubling its purchases of long-term government bonds. Starting in September, it will buy back $4 billion of bonds in each operation. The goal was to boost bond prices and push long-term borrowing costs back down. Long-term bonds rallied briefly after the announcement, but the relief quickly fizzled out. Within hours, bond yields started climbing higher once again. Many market analysts called the buyback plan a tiny plaster on a huge wound. Buying back $4 billion simply cannot offset the massive wave of new government debt. The Treasury also changed its plans suddenly, which damaged its credibility with some investors. To pay for these buybacks, the government will likely issue more short-term debt. That strategy leaves Washington exposed if interest rates remain high in the future. In the past, the central bank helped by purchasing massive amounts of bonds, but the central bank now wants to shrink its balance sheet instead. That leaves the Treasury chief trying to manage this huge market on his own. Bessent argues that government deficits will soon peak and begin to fall. He also expects energy prices to drop if tensions in the Middle East ease. Yet, independent budget forecasts show deficits remaining stubborn for years to come. Analysts remain very skeptical that politicians can pass real spending cuts right now. The central problem is whether financial engineering can overcome basic economic reality. For now, investors are still demanding higher returns before they trust Washington with their cash. For our fourth story, we move from bond markets to a very different kind of financial machinery. Most people think of China as the great manufacturing workshop of the world, yet that same vast industrial system now powers a massive global criminal economy. Estimates suggest this underground network generates nearly $1 trillion each year. That amount is roughly equal to the entire annual economic output of Switzerland. It covers everything from counterfeit goods and wildlife trade to drug profits and cyber scams. The primary engine behind this underground boom is Beijing's strict financial system. China restricts how much money its own citizens can send out of the country. Each person can only convert $50,000 into foreign currency each year. Wealthy Chinese savers want to move their money into safer overseas investments. Because they cannot do this legally, they turn to black market currency brokers. At the same time, international criminal syndicates face the exact opposite problem. Mexican drug cartels and cyber gangs collect huge amounts of cash abroad. They need a safe way to clean those funds and move them home. Chinese brokers solve both problems by matching the two groups together. A cartel hands illicit cash to a broker in North America or Europe. The broker then releases domestic funds in China to pay for Chinese goods. No money ever crosses an international border, so ordinary banking checks fail to catch it. These underground channels also support vast fraud compounds across Southeast Asia. Criminal networks have trafficked more than 300,000 people into forced labor there. Those compounds generate roughly $40 billion each year through predatory online schemes. Meanwhile, cryptocurrency brokers in Hong Kong help North Korean hackers convert stolen digital coins. The same underground financial routes help China buy sanctioned oil from Iran. China buys roughly 90% of Iranian oil exports through small banks and front companies. The shipments are often relabeled as Malaysian crude to bypass Western trade sanctions. Beijing has made some high-profile arrests and closed several scam compounds along its borders. Yet the broader shadow economy continues to grow because enforcement remains highly selective. These illicit networks help China maintain vital trade ties with sanctioned partners like Russia. They allow Beijing to secure cheap energy while keeping formal diplomatic distance. Strict currency controls were designed to keep money inside China and maintain domestic stability. Instead, they created the most efficient money laundering infrastructure on the planet. Washington sees this as a growing global threat, but Beijing has little incentive to stop it. For our final story today, we turn from global finance to the online world. Have you searched for product recommendations on the internet lately? For years, millions of people added the name Reddit to their search queries. They wanted honest advice from real people rather than polished marketing pages. On popular communities, volunteers actively debate product quality and weed out sponsored posts. In fact, about 40% of conversations on the platform relate to commercial activity. That makes these human discussions an absolute goldmine for tech companies. Now, artificial intelligence is turning that regular habit on its head. Search engines like Google increasingly present an AI overview at the very top. Users read the quick summary and leave without visiting the original discussion thread. Because of that shift, search referrals have dropped precipitously over recent months. Daily time spent on the Reddit app has dropped by about 8%. Investors took fright, and the company's share price has fallen by roughly a third. Yet chatbot creators still rely heavily on Reddit data to train their models. Research shows that the platform is currently the most cited source for top chatbots. To protect its business, Reddit is pursuing two separate paths. First, it struck licensing deals with major players like Google and OpenAI. Those tech firms reportedly pay $60 and $70 million every single year. Second, Reddit is taking aggressive legal action against unauthorized data collection. It has already launched lawsuits against artificial intelligence firms like Anthropic and Perplexity. Both companies deny breaking the law, but court victories could give Reddit stronger leverage. Still, the leadership knows licensing alone cannot save the platform. Their ultimate goal is encouraging people to visit the site directly. They want users to browse discussions and build communities inside the app. Direct engagement also helps them grow their advertising revenue, which remains quite healthy. The real puzzle is whether direct loyalty can overcome the sheer convenience of chatbots. If automated summaries answer every question, fewer people might bother joining the conversation. That brings us to the end of today's stories. Thank you for sharing your breakfast with me, and I will see you tomorrow morning.